Hi everyone, welcome to this video, created using Gemini Notebook. I've gone through the AI-generated subtitles and updated the proper names to match the Bible. If you notice anything I missed, feel free to leave a comment.
Hammers crashing into solid stone. Sacred statues are dragged from their ancient pedestals and violently pulverized into dust. The campaign escalated to a level of desecration that terrified the entire ancient world. Workers ripped open tombs of long-dead pagan priests, dragged out their bones, and incinerated them on the altars where they had once worshipped. The architect of this destruction was a single monarch, King Josiah of Judah. Kings usually maintain the religious order to keep the peace and protect their own power, but Josiah was tearing it down by the roots. This was a deliberate, systematic eradication campaign against his own nation's religious establishment. To understand what drives a king to such absolute extremes, we have to look at the nightmare he inherited. For the 70 years prior to Josiah's reign, under his grandfather Manasseh and his father Amon, the kingdom of Judah plunged into deep spiritual corruption. The elite class fully embraced imported deities. They built shrines to Baal and erected altars dedicated to the stars right inside the courts of Jerusalem. The darkest extreme occurred just outside the city walls, in the valley of Hinnom, where children were burned in ritualized sacrifice to the god Moloch. This map illustrates the looming geopolitical terror. The Assyrian Empire expanded westward, completely swallowing the northern kingdom of Israel. Judah was left entirely isolated. For those paying attention, Israel's annihilation was direct divine punishment for the exact same pagan practices now infecting Judah. So when Amon was assassinated and an 8-year-old Josiah was crowned king in 640 BC, he was handed a fractured nation. He was a child presiding over a state teetering on the edge of both divine wrath and total geopolitical collapse. By the time Josiah turned 20, he began making his own decisions. He launched an initial, localized purge to clear the pagan altars out of Jerusalem. He had a rare window of opportunity. The once unstoppable Assyrian Empire was rapidly weakening following the death of its great king, Ashurbanipal. This created a massive power vacuum in the region, allowing a client state like Judah to act boldly without fear of an immediate military crackdown. Taking advantage of this, Josiah marched his campaign north into former Israelite territory. He specifically targeted the ancient rival shrines at Bethel, smashing the standing stones and desecrating the altars that had stood for generations. At this stage, Josiah's actions were measured. It was a calculated blend of youthful religious piety and strategic border expansion. The absolute terror that would later define his reign hadn't surfaced yet. 6 years later, at age 26, Josiah shifted from destroying pagan sites to rebuilding his own. He commissioned a massive repair project for the dilapidated temple in Jerusalem. This ancient Hebrew text represents what the high priest Hilkiah found hidden deep within the temple ruins. It was a lost book of the law, most likely a copy of the book of Deuteronomy, an authentic ancient legal code that had been forgotten for decades. When his scribe read the text aloud, the reaction was immediate. Josiah violently tore his clothes in absolute horror. The scroll laid out a terrifying ultimatum: horrific curses, plagues, and total exile for any nation found in violation of the law. The text proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that Judah was in direct, fatal breach of the covenant. Josiah immediately sent a delegation to the prophetess Huldah. She confirmed his worst fears. The catastrophic curses written in the scroll were real, and they were coming. But out of mercy for Josiah's humility, the destruction would be delayed. He would not live to see it. Suddenly, a calculated political reform became a frantic, existential race against a ticking apocalyptic clock. This is what drove the king to start grinding statues into dust and burning human bones. He was trying to save his nation from impending doom. In a final attempt to unify the nation, Josiah centralized all worship in Jerusalem. He gathered the populace and hosted a massive Passover festival on a scale unseen for centuries to formally renew their covenant with God. 13 years of peace followed. But when Josiah was 39, a new geopolitical threat emerged. Egypt's Pharaoh Necho II was marching a massive army north along the coastline. This map shows the red route of Josiah's army marching aggressively to the choke point of Megiddo. The Egyptian forces were heading north to aid the last remnants of the Assyrian army, and Josiah made a fateful strategic decision to intercept them. Out on the plains of Megiddo, the king's luck ran out. Josiah was mortally wounded by a random Egyptian arrow. His death shattered the nation's hopes and triggered a period of bitter, intense mourning, led by the prophet Jeremiah. Looking at the arrows representing the Neo-Babylonian forces, we see the final collapse of the region. Josiah's sons quickly reverted the nation back to idolatry. The delay Huldah promised had expired, and Babylon soon swept in to completely destroy Jerusalem. Josiah's brutal eradication of the idols stands as the final effort of a king whose heart was shattered by a forgotten truth. His reign proves exactly what happens when forgotten words suddenly collide with a deeply corrupt reality.